Well, President Trump's tariff threat is back on the radar of Canadian politicians, threatening to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods on February 1st. We continue to talk about this because that date is very close. Opposition Leader Pierre Poilievre released a statement in response. He blamed the Liberals, saying, quote, "Common sense Conservatives are calling for Trudeau to reopen Parliament now to pass new border controls, agree on trade retaliation, and prepare a plan to rescue Canada's weak economy." End quote. And I should reframe that. I don't think the word blaming the Liberals is quite correct there, but that is the specific statement that he put out. Kate Harrison's vice chair at Summa Strategies, a government relations and communications firm based in Ottawa. She thinks Poilievre's statement is a mature response to the threat and not reactionary, and she's here to explain. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. How are you?
I'm well. So tell me a little bit about what you mean by a mature response.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Pierre Poilievre remains the opposition leader. He's not the prime minister. And so coming up with a detailed plan for Canada how should respond to tariffs is not his place. That's the place of the prime minister. And so I think it's practical to try and address the elephant in the room, which is the border. There was consensus amongst all of the opposition parties at the end of last year that we did need a plan for the border. The Liberals proposed $1.3 billion in new border spending, but then that plan effectively was torpedoed with prorogation. So I think that Poilievre is saying, listen, let's all get back to the table, have a discussion around the border, which we know is an irritant for Trump, and then we can have a more reasonable conversation around tariffs. But until we address that, we're going to be having a very lopsided conversation.
What do you think about Poilievre also making another statement where he said that Canada has never been so weak? There's a lot of talk about the need to be unified across the country right now. So how might that affect the conversations as we're thinking about our country in the States?
Yeah, I think there's two things that can be true here. The first is that Trump is being heavy-handed with Canada, and these tariffs are not justified. And Poilievre said that they were not justified yesterday, and that we need to have a response that defends Canada's interests. But it's also fair and true to point out that this situation did not happen overnight. The deterioration of the relationship with the U.S. is not something that happened in 24 hours. I would say that, successive poor economic policies, lack of investment in the border, lack of investing in Canada's defense spending at the NATO table, for instance. These are all things that have really contributed to the deterioration of that relationship. So we can't be surprised that we are in this vulnerable state. And I think we do need to take some ownership, yes, over how that relationship has gone, and it has not gone well. But also we need to be thinking bigger picture here in terms of what we can do to stand up an economy that is less vulnerable to these threats from the U.S. and allows Canada to be a little bit more self-sufficient.
We were mentioning, your thoughts on what Poilievre said being a mature response. I understand when you look at the Liberal response, you characterize it as reactionary. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I think that it's clear to me, based on how the Liberals have managed the relationship with Trump before he was elected, in terms of, taking out social media ads that painted Trump as a boogeyman. You had Chrystia Freeland standing up in the House just 2 weeks prior to his reelection, calling conservatives maple MAGA, and that was not a term of endearment, Marcy, when she was using it. So I think that they were very content for a long time to make Donald Trump out to be the enemy. And now they are trying to say that we are best friends again. You can understand that given he tends to be a bit of a petty person, that is not landing so well. So I don't think that we were prepared. And I would also say that we haven't done enough over the course of years to make Canada an attractive place to do business. The carbon tax is a big part of that equation. It's a significant reason why companies are going to the U.S. And looking to stand up jobs there as opposed to here in Canada. So not only did we poke Donald Trump in the eye repeatedly, that's what the Liberals chose to do for domestic political gain, but they also did not work to make our economy more resilient, make Canada a better place to do business, and that has made us all the more reliant on the U.S. in this time.
What do you make of all of the name calling on all sides right now by our federal politicians of each other?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is driven from the bottom up, a lot of the tone in politics. I see a lot of leaders responding to the frustrations that they see Canadians facing. I think that it goes on all sides of the aisle. And, not just one party is guilty of that. And voters will ultimately decide whether or not the tone is important to them when they cast their ballots. I think what will end up overshadowing that is who's putting forward policies and ideas that are better resonating with Canadians. I think ultimately that idea, those policies are going to be what wins the day as opposed to the conversation around tone.
I want to talk about something developing this morning. So the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the tariff threat is a tactic by Trump to begin renegotiating the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. And that, is coming up for discussion in next week. If that's true, how do you expect, because we've been focusing on Poilievre, how do you expect Poilievre to react to it?
Yeah, I think part of the issue right now is we see too many people reacting to the Trump news cycle and not dealing with some of the fundamentals. And the fundamental that we have right before us is our weak border. So let's start there. Let's make sure that we recall Parliament and have a discussion and a debate about whether or not our border response is sufficient. Again, this is something that all the parties had agreed to prior to prorogation. So let's start there before trying to have a longer conversation around USMCA. I think there's probably things that would benefit both sides of that agreement in order to strengthen it. But we have to deal with what is right before us and not, I think, give in to the Trump media cycle and having him drive the narrative. Let's focus on what we can control right now, which is our response to the border. And that's why I think the plan to recall Parliament, the proposal to do that, is a reasonable one for the Conservatives to make.
Kate, thanks for your analysis today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcy. Take care now.
That is Kate Harrison, Vice Chair at Summa Strategies. We will just mention here that Summa is a government relations and communication firm. They are based in Ottawa. And when it comes to, the narrative and in what Canada is saying, a big part of this is the premiers. They will be meeting with Justin Trudeau, in fact, today, as you've been hearing on World Report, and they will be talking about, from their point of view, what we should be discussing in terms of any retaliation efforts to push back against this tariff threat. So stay tuned.